Okay. All right. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you might be at the moment. I am Jason Walls from QA Cafe. You may have seen me around on some other presentations that we've given, as well as on our podcast, the Epic Melon podcast. And I am here with another LinkedIn Live event for us, which we found pretty cool, right? So it's kind of a branch from the traditional webinars, I think. And we wanted to dive into some stuff that we find important with another LinkedIn Live event. Um, and I have with me Matt Langwise for that purpose. And today we are going to be talking about what we have for best practices for testing Wi-Fi routers, APs, and mesh systems. And this is actually has coalesced into a couple of white papers that we have that we will share with attendees at the end. I'll reach out to all of you personally and send those links over to you. Um, but we felt like it might be good to have all of those key points sort of presented to you all and about the stuff that we've learned. We are using LinkedIn Live for this, so if you do have any comments, comment them directly into LinkedIn, and I'll see them pop up. Um, I'll bring them up to Matt. If it's something that we can address while he's going, but feel free to interrupt at any time. And if not, I will try to respond to you on LinkedIn after the fact. So why QA Cafe? Why are we talking about Wi-Fi best practices? So we've been doing this for a long time. Actually, we just crossed 20 years 2 years ago. So it's been 22 years. Man, the
Right?
20th
Where does the
anniversary
time
was already
go?
2 years ago.
I
We
just
had
had
the
my
whole
17th
logo.
year anniversary as well.
Oh
That's
yeah, that's
crazy.
right. Like that was like 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, yeah. So Matt was employee number three of QA Cafe. So we've been doing this for a long time, and Matt has been doing this for a very long time. And uh, I'll get into a little bit about who he is in a minute, but we've helped hundreds of customers do this with CD Router, right? And what we've learned is that fully automated testing of Wi-Fi devices that go beyond just that goes beyond just performance to the level of black box testing of the entire system is really what is essential to making sure that the product works and works well and will be robust and have a good end user experience and satisfaction for your customers, be those whether those customers are the operators that you're selling to or the actual subscribers that you're deploying to. And like this is the focus of CD routers testing, right? Is to do that holistic, comprehensive testing in a fully automated fashion. So, have you met Matt? He's um he's our VP of customer success, but he's done a lot of that here. So his job is to make sure that you are able to get that his job is to make sure you succeed. And what does that mean? It means that his job is to make sure that you get the most value out of your testing with CD Router, and that it's showing you real results, and that you are building better products as a result. And we take that very seriously, because we kind of pride ourselves on the fact that when you are buying a QA Cafe product, you are getting our support team as an extension of your own, to actually help you understand the protocols, help you understand what to test and why things are failing, rather than just going off on, fixing CD router bugs or anything like that. Just kidding. CD router doesn't have any bugs. If Tim is listening. But Matt also so he's done a lot here, but he's an audiophile. So like in his spare time, he's actually like going to what we call Hamfest. It's like an EE geek's dream, buying cool parts and fixing up old amplifiers to get that perfect sound. And I always find that as like a great analogy for what you end up doing here, because although it's like obviously CD router is a tool that people buy that gets deployed, that they use on their own. But we have so many stories of things where something's wrong with a particular dot, and Matt is like, "No, I'm gonna figure out what's wrong with this thing." And once that's happened, it's over. It's gonna be thing. And you actually see some results of one of those times that this happened. So he's gonna go over that in a minute. All right, Matt, I'm gonna turn things over to you, and yeah, have fun.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Let me just click on here. Let's get this over with. When Jason asked me to do this presentation, I wanted to take a step back and just present some high-level best practices. And I have three of them, which I'll go through. But I want to start with just acknowledging that Wi-Fi is hard. It really is. And that's sort of an understatement, probably an understatement to everybody that's here. There's just a lot that goes into Wi-Fi. Um, some of the things that stand out to me are that Wi-Fi is sort of an essential service at this point. Everybody needs it. Everybody uses it. It's required. People need it for work, education, health, keeping in touch with family and friends, entertainment, etc. Um, the advantage of Wi-Fi is that it's relatively cheap and easy for anyone to set up and create. But the real disadvantage is you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to know a lot about Wi-Fi in order to do that. So that's one of the big challenges. We have a lot of people that can go and turn a Wi-Fi network on without any real knowledge of what it takes to optimize a Wi-Fi network or about the environment, placement of devices, and things of that nature. So they end up in situations where the Wi-Fi maybe is not as good as it could be, and it's not necessarily because of the technology or the devices or the services. It's because of a lack of knowledge. Another thing that's really interesting about Wi-Fi is that despite that appearance of being simple and easy to set up and deploy and use, which it is for most users, it's actually unbelievably complex, as you all know, underneath the hood. Very challenging. There's a lot of technology advancements over the past 2 decades involved with Wi-Fi. There's different generations of devices. There's different security modes, different protocols, bands, etc. There's just a lot of stuff going on underneath the hood.
Even in the last 2 years alone.
Even with the advancement of Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi 6E, tons of new stuff is happening, and there's a lot of complexity there that's being hid from most users.
And one of the things that we've talked about a lot, especially on the show, is that Wi-Fi, I love this quote, that Wi-Fi is a victim of its own success, right?
Yeah.
And so we do try to use it for everything, but it's not necessarily designed to do everything, and that's the situation that we're in right now.
Right, exactly. So despite all of this complexity and all of the advancements that have been made, there's still this pressure to keep the price of Wi-Fi low, and that's another challenge. And then, of course, the biggest challenge, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is it's just the environment. Air is a very fickle medium, and Wi-Fi environments are not only large, but also very challenging. And there's a lot of congestion and noise, influences from outside things that you have no control over that impact the environment. It's just a very, very challenging environment to work in. As I like to tell people, the home, the office, the coffee shop can be a very scary place for Wi-Fi. So the first best practice that I'll mention, it all starts with this. It's developing and implementing an automated test strategy. Now, we have a fantastic white paper, which it's linked at the end, but Jason will send it out to everybody that's online as well. Definitely read that if you haven't already read it. And start there. And really what you want to focus on, if you don't already have an automated test strategy for the devices that you're building and deploying, now is the time to create one. I've seen many teams that lack this high-level strategy focused on automation and rely way too heavily on manual testing. As you all know, manual testing just leads to inconsistency. It's inefficient, unreliable. There's a lot of pitfalls to manual testing, so avoiding manual testing is key. This test automation strategy serves as your roadmap, and it will help to guide you through the product development process and the complexities that you're going to face. So start here. And even if you already have an automated test strategy in place, it's always worth reviewing it periodically and making sure that it's meeting your needs. Like, ask yourself, is your current test automation strategy working for you? Are there things that you're not happy with? Is it clunky? Could it be improved? And then iterate and improve it over time. So having that automated test strategy will lead to faster development cycles. Automated, and that's really just because of automation. Automating tests allows for the continuous integration and delivery, or CI/CD, which speeds up the development process, leads to improved product quality. So obviously, comprehensive and consistent testing improves quality. This is a big one in my mind. Resource efficiency is one of the biggest benefits of having that strategy in place. Taking a step back and thinking about your entire process. Automation obviously reduces the need for manual testing, as I mentioned earlier, but it also cuts down on human error and resource costs. It also allows you to run tests continuously, which is huge. So that then makes it possible to increase your test coverage and or reduce your test cycle time. So automation is really the key to all of this. It also makes it possible to find issues early, which is really important. Nobody likes it when issues are found by customers in the field. That's definitely a bad thing, and you want to try and catch those issues as early as possible within the development cycle and fix them there. So having a test automation strategy will help you do that. And then also having the ability to scale. And what I mean by that is once you've started to implement your test automation strategy, most people find that they want to do more. They want to test more devices. They want to test more firmware, more hardware, more features, they want to expand their test coverage. So having a strategy that allows you to scale and gives you that roadmap to scale is super important. There's a lot of things that go into an effective automation strategy. I break it down into 4 major categories, and these are covered in a lot more detail in our white paper. But the first one is the frequency of testing. And the question you want to ask yourself is, how often should you test? That's the fundamental question you're trying to answer. Now, that largely depends on where you get your software, your device, your Wi-Fi CPE software from. If you are developing that software yourself internally, you're going to take one path. You will want to look at using CI/CD tools. You will want to test per build, per commit, perhaps nightly. There's a lot of different strategies there. The idea is to perform testing as quickly as possible so that you can feed those results back into your development team and fix things super fast. Now, if on the other hand, you're actually getting the CPE software from a third party, maybe a partner that you're working with, you are now subject to their schedule, and you're going to be getting a finished product. So you have to treat things a little bit differently. So that's why I say, really, when you're trying to answer this question in the process of creating that overall test strategy, you need to think about where your software is actually coming from. There's always that debate of speed versus coverage in this. Sometimes you want to produce test results very quickly so that you can feed that back quickly and get it resolved quickly. In other cases, you want to focus on wide coverage, comprehensive coverage of tests. So there's different strategies, different ways to handle that. And then keep in mind, you can always increase your test throughput to help you accomplish all of these goals by parallel testing. Test coverage is the next major component of an effective strategy. And obviously that sounds pretty obvious what that is, but the question you're asking yourself here is, what should you test? What do you want to test? I always tell people, focus on those critical features. So start with that. There's obviously a lot of stuff to test, and to be completely comprehensive and hit everything is a giant task. So break it down. Focus on the critical features first. Make sure that you have a diversity of tests as well, meaning don't just focus on one specific thing like performance tests. A lot of people have a tendency to just look at performance tests, which is a trap. You need to really be looking at comprehensive test coverage, and I'll actually talk a little bit about that later as well. But then also, when you're breaking this down, do a risk-based prioritization of all the features and protocols in your device and figure out which ones you think are the most dangerous from a testing perspective, and start with those as well. Tools and data. So here you are asking yourself and trying to answer the question, what tools should I use and what data do I need to collect? Obviously, when you're developing an automation strategy, you really want to use tools that are or they can be automated, that have well-documented APIs that are well supported from companies with a good reputation. Because what you want to do is link all these things together to automate as much as you possibly can. In terms of data, you're going to need different data at different times for different purposes. So you want to have the ability to present data in a very concise format if you need a very quick high-level report for management or something like that. And at the same time, in certain cases, you're going to need packet level data and detailed logs to be able to debug complicated, weird things that pop up every once in a while. So make sure you're collecting enough data so that you can drill all the way down if you need to, but at the same time have the ability to hide that complexity when you don't need it. And then this is extremely important too. The last component of an effective strategy is just the coordination with your partners. If you find a failure, what do you do about it? How do you fix it? How do you get it resolved? So making sure that you have very clear paths to communicate and collaborate with your partners is important. And partners can be an outside organization. They can be a vendor that you're getting your CPE devices from, or it could also be another team within your company. Maybe you are the QA team and you need to coordinate with the dev team. So you need to be able to quickly and easily reproduce issues when you find them, share the data that they need to debug and troubleshoot those, and just generally work with them to help get those issues resolved as quickly as possible. And then feed all of that back in so that you can retest and verify. This is my advice to everybody. Once you've got that high-level strategy, once you've taken a step back and come up with that high-level strategy, it's time to implement it. And I've seen in many cases, people have the strategy, they do the work, they come up with that strategy, but then when it comes time to implement, it just seems like a daunting task. So don't be afraid to start small, just start. That's the most important thing I want to get across to everybody. It's just really important to take that next step of going from the actual strategy to the implementation phase, and keep it simple, and you can evolve it over time. And really what you're trying to do is automate as much as possible, have a good diverse set of test coverage as part of your overall strategy, and then coordinate and collaborate with your partners and continuously iterate, evolve, and improve it over time.
And I really like this point because it came up. It came up we did a recent survey asking our CD Router customers just some questions about Wi-Fi testing and what it is they currently do and what sort of stuff they'd find valuable in the future. And it was actually kind of, I don't want to say it was shocking, because it was definitely something that we probably knew. But it was definitely a high number of the number of people that do rely on manual testing, at least for some things, right? And it's understandable because sort of once you have that process in place, it's very difficult to change it. So I really like this point because it's like, look, even if you have a process like that already in place, you can still start small and then slowly build on top of that afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many benefits to automation, and I think everybody here understands that. Just start with something that you can do. Another thing that's important is making sure that you find consistency in your testing. It's really important to make sure that the automation that you do have in place and the test results that you are generating are consistent. So make sure they're consistent and make sure it's useful to you and it's helping you accomplish your larger goals that are part of your strategy. All right, so best practice number 2 is to focus on comprehensive test coverage. And what I mean here, I touched on this previously, is that a lot of people have a tendency to focus on one specific thing when they're testing wireless devices, Wi-Fi devices, CPE devices. Make sure that you aren't just laser focused on one thing. It's very, very important to actually have a wide and deep set of test coverage for the devices that you are validating. The thing that we see a lot is that people will spend a lot of time and energy and effort on wireless performance testing, And that's great. It is absolutely critical. It needs to be done. It needs to be understood. It needs to work well. But that doesn't give you a complete picture of the quality of a device and how well it's going to work in the field. It's really, really important to make sure that you test the whole thing as a finished product in order to understand how it's going to behave and how well it's going to work. I think we have a minute here, but like one of the analogies that always pops into my head here when I think about this is I relate this to a car, right? It's when you buy a car, you're not just looking at how fast it can accelerate and what its top speed is. Yeah, that's important and it's fun to talk about, but there's a lot more that goes into making a good car. It needs to have a good braking system. The handling needs to be good. The infotainment system and navigation needs to work well. All of those things contribute to building a great car,
I
not
always use
just
the door
how well
test.
it performs. What? Oh,
The door
okay.
the, the door needs to close and sound really good when it does.
You need a thunk, right? Yeah. I don't know what a thunk would be on a Wi-Fi router, but we could probably come up with something interesting.
It just works.
Yeah, it just works. So we break down all of that additional testing beyond the wireless sort of physical air testing into 4 different categories. And I'll just talk really quickly about each one of those. The first is functional testing. And functional testing really refers to validation of core protocols and features. So this is all of the standard stuff, making sure that your IPv4 and IPv6 implementation, the core protocols are working as expected. So DHCP, PPPoE, DHCP v6, and so on, transition technologies, all of that kind of stuff. The core protocols also need to work well in order for the overall experience to be good. So you need to test, obviously, DNS and multicast, IGMP, things like that. If you are implementing management protocols such as TR69 and USP, you have to make sure that those are working well. So you need to perform functional testing on those protocols. And then there's all of the other sort of key features, things like parental controls, band steering, security, NAT, firewall, etc. So there's a lot of stuff that is covered by this functional testing umbrella. And it's not just doing positive verification of the protocols themselves. There's also an element of doing negative testing and sending a bad DHCP v6 packet, for example, and making sure that the device under test does not crash. So that's a big component and big part of this as well. The next bucket is interop testing. And by interop testing, really what we're doing, or what we are getting at here, is a validation of configs and connectivity. So what you're trying to do is verify that all of the different modes, connection types that the devices support actually work. So it sort of crosses the line into functional a little bit, but it's more based on the variety of configurations. So for example, if your device supports MAP-T and MAP-E on the WAN, as well as all of the standard stuff like DHCP and PPPoE, you really want to make sure that all of those different WAN modes actually work. You shouldn't just focus on DHCP and DHCP v6, for example. So make sure you're testing all of those different config options and the different connection modes that are supported. On the Wi-Fi side, on the LAN side, obviously you need to test both Wi-Fi and Ethernet connectivity, but for Wi-Fi, it's a little more complicated because you have the security modes, the wireless security modes to think about as well. And there's many different combinations of security modes to look at. WPA3 is the most current, but most devices are still implementing and offering WPA2, and then you have mixed modes, WPA2 plus WPA3, and so on. Some devices even still support and let the user configure WPA1, so you probably want to test that too, just to make sure that it doesn't do anything weird. So there's a lot of stuff to check there. And then also on the Wi-Fi side, you have all of the different frequency bands, the different PHY modes, the different channels, and different channels are available. Different channels are available in different regions, so you need to keep that in mind as well. All right, performance. Everybody loves performance. So what we're talking about here in the performance testing bucket is obviously pretty straightforward. Validating the layer 3 performance of various traffic types with one or more clients. And you can do that in different directions. You can go LAN to LAN, WAN to LAN, LAN to WAN, and so on. And you're looking at the actual sort of aggregate good put through that device and measuring that and using that as a baseline for future testing and regression testing. I also lump a few other things into this performance testing bucket. The big one is client scaling. So creating lots of different Wi-Fi LAN clients, for example, and making sure that the device can handle that additional load and that there's no strange things that happen when you connect 100 wireless clients, for example, to the device. There's also protocol scaling, which falls into this bucket. So creating lots of TCP connections to the device, creating a large number of DHCP message transactions in a short period of time, and creating lots of DNS requests. And one of my favorite things to do with CD Router is to run our wireless LAN association stress test, which just takes a client or many clients now as well, and rapidly associate and disassociate. And I've seen all kinds of interesting things happen when you run that test against devices.
And then the last link I did just link to Brian's webinar that he did recently on that entire bullet 3 point when it comes to Wi-Fi 7 devices.
Oh yeah, great. All of these links will be at the end of the presentation as well. So when this goes out to everyone, you'll have access to all of that information. The last bucket that we've been talking a lot about recently, it's one of my favorite things, is stability testing. And for those of you that don't know, what that really means is the verification of both functionality and performance, but now over time, over longer periods of time. My personal strategy is to verify stability in 6, 12, and 48-hour increments. And then if I have more time, I'll even go out a week in some cases. But what we've seen is that if you run just performance tests by themselves with no functional testing happening in parallel, performance will stay solid on many devices. There's no performance issues when you run performance alone on most devices. Likewise, if you run just functional tests continue to work, pass as you would expect for long periods of time. What stability does is mixes those two things together, and that's where we start to see very interesting behavior. So if you have a lot of DHCP transactions happening while you have performance tests running, that's when weird things happen. So we've been really pushing stability testing as an important part of any test automation strategy for a while now, just because it's very, very important. Yeah, like I just said, stability testing really, in my mind, this is where you often find interesting things. It's important that you do stability testing in addition to the regular performance and functional testing that you would do, just because it does stress the device in a much different way. And here's a classic graph of why stability testing is important. So this is just one device that we have in our lab. And you can see this is a performance graph. And what you can see are those two plots, the blue and the green one. I believe this is TCP traffic, TCP upload and download throughput through the device. It drops off significantly. It drops off from 200 megabits per second approximately down to about 20. And the only reason it did that is because we were running a mix of DHCP and wireless stress tests at the same time. And this is the kind of thing that you'll see when you start performing your own stability testing. All right, Jason, any questions coming in that we should address now before I jump into the next section?
Not yet. I did want to kind of throw that out there. I did just link to your stability series too. So when I was talking about that case that Matt kind of dove into when something was wrong. This was the example, and there's a video in that series where Matt tells the story behind this, and it's very, very sobering because it was something that without stability testing, it wasn't being caught in the field because it was effectively happening at what appeared to be like random intervals because it was caused by something. It was caused by a very defined criteria, right? I think it was something like 200 associations or deassociations.
Yeah, there was a
And
tipping point based on number of Wi-Fi associations. Yeah, that's exactly right, Jason.
right. And so in the field for this operator, it just looked like this was happening randomly, but it was actually happening at a very consistent time. It just happened to be meeting that threshold at for different times for different people, right?
Right, because if you had a large network, you'd hit that. I believe it was 300 associations. That was the point where bad things started happening with this particular device. So if the device was in a large home with a lot of devices, you would obviously hit 300 associations much more quickly than if it was in a home with only one or two devices. And so that's why it was so difficult to actually track down for this provider.
There was a good question that came in about whether or not stability testing is like a expansion of CD router, and so, I mean, you can answer that if you want, but it's basically the answer is yes and no. If you want to do stability testing in the way that Matt is talking about, you do need to have the ability to do our performance testing. But then the types of things you want to do beyond that is entirely dependent on, the things you want to hit your device with.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly it, Jason. So really the prerequisites for doing stability testing in CD routers, the performance expansion. I always have IPv6 as well. So IPv6 expansion and then multi-port expansion. So if you have those three things, you have the right pieces to actually do stability testing. And my recipe, the one I always start with and use, is in the link that you just sent out as well. So check that out. And obviously, if anyone has any questions about stability testing, I love talking about it. So either ping me on LinkedIn or send me an email. We can get on the phone and chat about it too. All right. So the third and final best practice is to optimize your test environment for Wi-Fi testing. So one of the challenges with testing Wi-Fi is the RF environment. And it is, in my opinion, the single biggest variable in all of Wi-Fi testing. So it's really important that you know what your Wi-Fi environment is. There's a lot of challenges here. And because no two RF environments are the same, it can be very different. No two environments, not only are no two RF environments the same, your RF environment might not be the same tomorrow as it was today, and it usually isn't. So it makes it really challenging in some cases to reproduce issues that you find because the environment is always changing, is always different. Most test labs are also extremely congested and noisy. Ours is, and I know many of our customers have even bigger labs than we do. So that's a constant challenge that just adds to the complexity of testing in open air. Congestion and noise are obviously difficult to control. If you have full control over the lab and there are no other teams, no other individuals that also have their own priorities and their own testing and are sharing that lab space with you, then you have an advantage that a lot of people don't. I know our office here at QA Cafe is inside of a large old New England mill building, a huge, huge old textile mill. And we have neighbors above us, below us, and on both sides of us. And so not only is our RF environment crazy because of all of the crazy testing that we do, we also have to deal with all of the other access points in the businesses and apartments and other offices around us.
If anyone ever wants to see what it looks like, that's our office out there.
Oh yeah.
You can see all the exposed beams and everything.
One of the most maddening things about the RF environment is that it is subject to change at any time. That's the thing that I find particularly challenging is what you see today might not be what you see tomorrow. And something outside could turn on and impact your testing and turn off. You'll never know what it was, where it came from, and that can be just a really big challenge. But despite all of these complexities and challenges with the RF environment, it is possible to improve your RF environment for testing if you need to. I'll talk a little bit more about some of those ways that you can do that in just a minute. So despite those challenges and with the understanding that you can improve your RF environment, it's also very important to know that you can do some level of Wi-Fi testing in open air. The next slide I'm going to jump to in a minute here has a nice breakdown. But open air testing is obviously easy and cost effective. It doesn't require any additional hardware. You don't need to cable anything up. You can just start doing it. It's obviously extremely challenging due to the unpredictable nature of the RF environment, as I just mentioned, which means it can lead to inconsistent results. And one other thing that you should be aware of is if you are testing in open air, the performance measurements more than likely will be lower than those maximum numbers that you might be looking for and expecting. But open air testing is also nice and important because it is a little more realistic. When your Wi-Fi devices are deployed, they're not deployed in perfect environments inside of an anechoic chamber. They're deployed in a home, which is a crazy RF environment unto itself with lots of other devices, and the device might be stuffed inside of a cabinet somewhere. So testing in open air is very valuable for that alone. It is just a little more realistic. So testing in open air, as I just said, is okay. So take that away from this this talk today. Just know that you can do open air testing in most environments. I put a little star there because I know that there are some environments that are actually just a little too crazy to really effectively do any open air testing, but there's not many of those. So if you've been holding out on adding Wi-Fi testing to your test strategy, don't. Take an honest look at your RF environment and see if there is anything you actually can do. And the biggest thing that we recommend not doing in open air is trying to hit those maximum performance numbers for Wi-Fi. You really need a clean environment to get those numbers. But if you're okay with lower performance just due to congestion and noise in the open air environment, it's absolutely okay and good to do performance testing and use that as a relative number that you can then compare across test runs and across devices.
Yeah, I think we talk about that a lot in some of the other in the white paper about treating max performance, treating your perfectly clean, it's a Tuesday afternoon and it's sunny outside and my device is completely isolated inside of a chamber and this is the max performance I'm getting as the baseline, right? So once you get that baseline, then you can use it to compare to other things rather than trying to treat it as like reality.
Yeah, I honestly, the way that I think about it is I break wireless performance testing specifically into two categories. There's that max performance, and then there's the relative performance. And for everything that we do here at QA Cafe, we use RF chambers for testing max performance, but we still do a ton of Wi-Fi performance testing in open air just to get that relative measurement, which we can then use to compare across devices and test runs. All right, so if you do need to control that RF environment, it is possible. It takes planning, takes some money, and it takes lab space. But you can get an RF test chamber in almost any size you want, from a room to a small little chamber that can hold one or two devices. So we recommend adding an RF test chamber to your lab and environment if you have the space for it, and if you want to really ensure that any testing that's sensitive to congestion and noise is done in the proper way. Another thing that we are looking at very closely is using programmable RF attenuators to optimize signal levels. So we are actually working on this. We sent out a survey that some of you might have received a few weeks ago we're looking at adding support for RF attenuators to CD router in the future. If you're interested in learning more about that, just send us an email or poke us on LinkedIn. We're happy to talk about it. It's also really important if you are using chambers and attenuators to make sure that you're using high quality cables and antennas. Antennas really need to be rated for the bands you're trying to test. So don't use a dual band antenna in the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi band. It's not going to work very well. So make sure that you're using a tri-band antenna. Pretty much there's no reason not to use a tri-band antenna these days. So make sure everything that you have in your environment is rated for what it is that you're trying to do. Another strategy to control the congestion and noise in an environment is to use PDUs, which is a power distribution unit, to turn things that aren't being used off. So if you have the ability to connect all the different devices in your lab to a PDU, you could turn all of them off, which would reduce the congestion and noise, and then turn on just the one that you're trying to test, and that will help as well. So yeah, that's basically it. I know test chambers require space and money, but they are a good investment in certain cases for different types of testing, depending on what your goals are. So yeah, get started today. These are really the 3 high-level points I wanted to get across. Develop and implement an automated test strategy if you don't have one. Don't be afraid to start small and get that going. Make sure that you have comprehensive test coverage as part of that strategy. Don't just laser focus on one specific area or one specific thing. And then optimize your testing for Wi-Fi if needed. And you might not need to, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But it's okay to have a mix of open air and chamber-based testing as well. So just keep that in mind. And then the key to everything here, can't say this enough, is automated testing. Make sure that everything you do has an eye towards automation. And obviously rely on well-supported tools from companies with a great track record and that have fantastic support. And that's basically it. Jason and I are always available to chat. So reach out to us at any time through any means, and we will happily talk about any of these things in more detail.
Literally any means, like you can come show up at our house.
Yes. Send me a text. Many of you have my cell number. It's in my email signature. So just a couple of test setup images here. This is a typical test setup using a CD router system with a PDU, which is part of the new it's an optional part of the new NTA 3K that we've released. This has 6 different devices connected, and it also shows the RF attenuator. So this would be your open air test setup that has multiple devices all running tests in parallel to help you achieve that wider test coverage or shorter test cycle time, or some combination of the two. And then obviously, if you had a need for RF chambers for certain types of testing, achieving those max performance numbers, for example, you could add those in as well. And that's basically it.
All right, and that last slide that you have, people won't be able to click on those links live,
yes.
but those are all things that I'll send out the PDF of these slides so that you guys have access to all those things, in addition to our white papers. But these are all a bunch of good resources that we've produced in the past along these same lines, and yeah, especially. Oh, I think the building the automated test strategy one, that is the white paper. So we'll send those out. But especially that stability testing. I know people have asked about it a lot. And one of the things that was just coming up on the comments is that how it's like what you're effectively doing is trying to you're trying to replicate what would actually happen in the field in a drastically shorter period of time. Right. And when you're building an automated test strategy, one of the things that you'll see in the white paper, and one of the things that Matt touched on is, when to do that sort of testing. And you can do that longer term stability testing when you're at a stage in development, or when you're at a stage in the week when you are ready to do that kind of a thing and test it for as long as possible. And what you're doing is simulating, hundreds of different kinds of user activity in a very short period of time, and then doing performance on top of it, and then doing it again and again and again and again. And that's how we find issues like that, And it's those are the hidden ones.
And then the nice thing about automating all of that, having tools in place that allow you to automate all of that, is that you can repeat it, right? It's repeatable.
Mhm.
If you do find something, fantastic. Now go and try it again and see if it's reproducible. And if it is, now you have that reproduction scenario. It's ready to share with one of your partners, whoever's helping you fix the issue. They can rerun it and reproduce it and get it fixed. So it's again, it's really important to have everything automated as much as possible.
Right. And as part of us giving these presentations, it's not like we're trying to discount the need to do that really isolated, perfect max throughput stuff. Um, but our point here is that there is a time to do that, and it's only so valuable, and there's only so much you can do with it after that, right? And there are just to vent for a minute. I mean, I feel like there is sort of a culture around evaluating devices, operators evaluating devices on just getting that proof point and seeing what that maximum number is, and then going from there. But it's such a tiny part of the story,
It
right?
is. It is. That's the trap, right? And everybody should
And
be
it's very
aware of
expensive to
that.
do. So, like,
It is. It is. It's an important part of the process, but that alone does not tell you the complete picture of how well the device is going to work. You really need to make sure that you're touching all of these things and that you have comprehensive test coverage. Um, and having that comprehensive test coverage it takes time, and so that's why you do need to weigh, like, how long do you want your test cycle to be, because you might have to make trade-offs there to get as much testing and as comprehensive um, as much testing done comprehensively, while at the same time trying to meet a test cycle time of maybe a week, for example.
Mhm.
So use parallel testing, for example. Add more to your environment so that you can do more stuff in parallel. That will allow you to achieve both of those goals simultaneously.
And for those not familiar with what we're talking about when we say parallel testing, is the ability to run effectively multiple CD router test packages at the same time on different ports, so you can be
Correct.
testing multiple devices at the same time. And I think we did a presentation on this somewhere, where effectively the there are different ways to get the most out of parallel testing. One is to, like, say, test exactly the same device with exactly the same firmware, you know, multiple times with, with different test configurations at the same time, so you can do them all at once. And then another is to diversify your device under test, run different firmwares at the same time. There's a lot of different combinations you can do.
Yeah, there's a great white paper on that around Jason too. I don't actually know if I have that one in my set of slides at the end, but we should add that before we send it out.
For sure. Cool. All right. If anyone else has any questions, please do throw them in the LinkedIn comments. But the beauty of LinkedIn Live events is this is now here. It's now up here. So if anybody has any comments in the future and you registered for the event and you want to have a chat with us or with any of your fellow attendees, who probably all have their own thoughts on this matter, like, that's what's cool about LinkedIn Live. We can continue this conversation. And yes, I will share this presentation and those links to those white papers with people who agreed who consented to contact from us. So LinkedIn, I think, gave you that option when you registered for the event. And we will be doing other things with this video in the future. And we are always, always open to have this conversation all the time. You'll see an article coming from us soon, probably with links to this, about where the best place is to spend your Wi-Fi testing dollars. Um, it's something that we hold very dearly. It's something we have a lot of experience with, about what the real issues end up being and how to get to them. And Matt covered all those best practices to get to those things. So yeah, thank you very much, Matthew. And we'll see you all on the next LinkedIn Live event. And for those of you who have attended our webinars and our LinkedIn Live events, if you have any comments on how you like this format and whether we should continue to do these in the future. Please let me know because we are kind of experimenting with it right now. All right. Thank you, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.